Think of yourself as an organization. Think about how you want to show up in the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan. Today on the show, we have Joy Branch. Joy, how you doing?
I'm great, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. We've been talking for a little bit now, kind of going through some things, getting to know each other a little bit before we hit record. I think it's going to be a great conversation, and I feel like we're going to be able to be really blunt and direct on a lot of things and talk about a lot of different topics. So why don't you kick us off? Tell us what you do for a living and what's one thing most people don't know about you that's maybe a little odd or bizarre.
Well, I am a executive coach, and I work with leaders, entrepreneurs in the space of leadership development. So the kind of short summary of that is I'm a leadership coach, and absolutely love it. I found my joy, pun intended and not intended. And something that people don't know about me, I guess I would say that I'm kind of a nerd. Like when I was a little girl, I turned my closet into a library. I pushed all my clothes to the side and I got, I guess what we would call now a Sharpie. And I wrote the numbers on the side of all my books, and I would sit in the closet and read my books. So there you have it.
That sounds tranquil.
It
It
was, you
just
know what?
sounds awesome.
No, it was, and listen, when I think about it, when I kind of flash back into my life, I didn't know things were going to get, the way they turned out. Going in that closet was a cool place to go. It was just, I was in the closet with my books and my clothes. So,
What a cool thing.
and you know what? The truth is, 50 some odd years later, nothing's changed. I still have lots of closets and lots of books.
That's the way it should be. You know, I love that idea of being able to do that. I always want to know what was the motivation behind that or what was the intention behind that. And oftentimes it can be really pure of like, well, I love books and I wanted my own little space. Sometimes it can also be, well, that was the safest space for me to be because the rest of life was tumultuous or there was just craziness going on. Well, what, I guess to pick a camp or pick a side with that, which side of that did you fall on?
You know what? It's interesting. I did it because I just wanted to be with my books. Like when I was a kid, every week when you would go to school, I went to a private Lutheran school. I'm from LA, and my school was Trinity Lutheran in Hawthorne. So every week, you would get an opportunity to purchase books from the weekly reader. So my mother knew that every week I was going to come home, and because I had books I wanted her to buy. So I collected a couple of books, and in my mind, I'm like, I have my own little library. So it was because I love my books. Um, I can remember reading Little House on the Prairie and Pippi Longstocking and all that. I just loved my books. So, and I still do.
Yeah.
I do.
Pippi Longstocking. God, I couldn't
Yes.
couldn't even tell you last time. But as soon as you said that, the theme song kicked into my head.
Yes. Yes. Charlotte's Web,
Yeah.
all these. I remember my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Haynes, read The Hobbit to us. And like that was the best part. I didn't want to go play. I wanted to sit and just go into the world of that imaginary world. So
Yeah. Oh man, what a cool thing. It's like it's your mind palace at that point. You get
yeah.
to be able to create, you get to explore in there. My dad used to read The Hobbit to me when I was little. Like that's what we'd read when
Oh,
I'd
very
go to
cool.
sleep. And I remember by the time I got into, I think it was like ninth grade or something, he had summer reading. They were like, well, we need you to read The Hobbit, Fahrenheit 451, and something else. I didn't like reading in high school because I wanted to go play music and go basically be an obnoxious teenager. But I remember being like, shit, that's the one book I'm going to read. And I ate it up and I loved it because it tied back to some core memories as a child with my dad reading this and making the sounds and the different noises and all that sort of stuff. But what a cool thing. Like, you could have done different things, you could have done things outside or whatever. But I think it's a cool thing for us as people to be able to go do the thing that we want to do. It feels really sacral at that point.
Yeah.
We're like, I was led to go do this thing, and what a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. And that can be really, again, it can be one of those things that can be based on trauma or based off an escape because you're just trying to escape. It can also be something that I think is kind of the seedling to what you then become later on down the road. And I'm really glad that you brought up books like right away, because one of the things that I thought about as soon as I saw that you're an executive coach and you work with leaders is a book that has dramatically and in some ways fucked me up. Um, a book called The Last Word on Power by Tracy Goss. Have you read
Oh,
that?
no, I haven't. I haven't read that.
Fucked me up in such an incredible way. It's about executive reinvention.
Mm,
Not as much from like the executive side of it is a bit of a Trojan horse
hmm.
because it's like you people that are in leadership and in some sort of business, we're going to talk to you from that angle. But really, it's about us as people changing based on this subconscious winning strategy that was created in our formative years that told us this is how you win in life. This is what you do to win. But the executive reinvention is that's cool. You've done all those things, and what you've done to this point will not get you any further.
Yes.
My partner had one friend who read literally the first sentence that was basically that. She threw it against the wall and didn't pick it up for 3 months. It was like, fuck you. And
You
it
know
went back and changed everything.
that the author escapes me, and hopefully the name will come to me before my you know brain fade doesn't kind of kick back in. But there's a very famous book, "What Got You There Won't Get You
Mm,
Here,"
yeah,
and I think you have to be able to reinvent yourself daily. We are reinventing ourselves, or we should be. But we have to first think about, which is you got to first begin with what are your thoughts and how do you move your thoughts? How do you operationalize your thoughts into behaviors? How do you move yourself forward? And you can think your way in and out of anything. I mean,
sure.
the truth is it's not easy. Just because you can say something quickly doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah,
And you can say one word like stop, but is that easy? No, it's not
yeah,
easy. So it's not, I think people get those two things confused because there are some things that take a very long time to do, but they're easy to do. And then they're quite the opposite is also true. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a book I have to add to my library.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was actually going to make an audio version of it because they hadn't her and her team, and she died last year, I believe. But I tell a lot of people about it. But a friend of mine is starting a new business. I told her, and she texted me. I don't know, maybe a week or two ago, and was like, "This is great. I'm listening to it." And she said, "I was like, wait a minute, listening." And then we found out that it was on Audible as of like a week ago. I've listened to it 3 times since.
Wow.
It's incredible, but it literally is reshaping, reinventing, but understanding the stories. Like our subconscious is just here to save us and keep us alive. And there's stories that are created. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show was to talk about leadership and executive reinvention or just how leaders are. Because one of the things that's really stood out to me is so many leaders think, well, I want to change the organization and I want it to be a certain way.
Good for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, cool.
Good for you.
That's cool. Um, but it's the person needing to be able to be changed. I've seen so many times where leaders of businesses are just not good people or they're pushing bad ideas and they may make a ton of money, but all of that venom is just going through the rest of their organization. And likewise, on the opposite side of that, there's some leaders that really can't lead and they're too easygoing almost, it seems, but there's a sweet spot. So what do you do to work with people to be able to figure out how they can reinvent themselves, heal their own stuff to then be able to work on their actual business?
That's like the perfect question for me, and I'll tell you why. I created the self-entitled project called the Joy Project. Okay. And the Joy Project was born out of my identifying a gap in organizations and individuals, entrepreneurs, et cetera, between what people desire and what actually takes place. Okay. And foundational to that, the very first thing to me, like, is awareness. So what I do is I work with individuals, organizations, entrepreneurs, or whomever decides that they think that they want to increase their awareness. And it is so important for you to increase your awareness because that's when you get to make the change, right? I think about it sometimes. I have an acronym, and the acronym is ART. So it's awareness, reflection, and transformation. And the transformation piece is something that happens over time. But foundational to everything is your awareness. Like, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Like, if you don't know that it needs to be changed, you will never change it. So you've got to get that awareness. So when you talk about leaders who come into spaces or they're appointed into roles, and it's kind of funny to me because everybody that comes in thinks they need to change something. Okay. And they think they need to change it for a few reasons. I have my theories around why they think they need to change it. So let's just talk about the traditional executive who, in my opinion, in many cases are highly compensated, right? So when you come into an organization, they've courted you and you've, promised that when you come in, you're going to change the organization. So you got to come in and change something. You have to come in and make those people who identified you as top tier talent, you have to make them feel like A, that they made the right choice, and B, that they're going to get their money's worth. So you can't just come in and say, oh, okay, well, this looks pretty good. I'll leave it as is, because that wasn't part of the agreement. Both you and the organization had all these conversations about, this is what the org needs. You're the person who's going to help the org meet their needs. And now we get into this psychological contract and we move forward, and you're going to come change the entire culture and everything's going to be fine. Okay. So you and I know that that's not going to happen. And one of the reasons why it's not going to happen, the subtitle or the subtext of the Joy Project is that it is a systemic reflective leadership development program. And the reason why I started with systemic is because you are operating within a system, and everybody needs to know that. If you are in the third grade and you go to a new elementary school, that playground has a system. There's a boss, there's a bully, all that stuff is already on the playground. So you have to go in there and figure out, where do you fit on the playground? And, whether it's a playground or, a corporation, you have to go and you have to assess the situation, right? You got to show up, you got to assess the situation. And that's what happens in organizations. And so it makes me happy to work with leaders who are in very, very critical situations, whether it's post-merger environment or, they work for an organization where the market has shifted and their product or service is not doing as well as it had before. This is the thing that my heart goes out to leaders, and I'll tell you why. Who do they have to call to say, I don't know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Like, who can they call? They can't tell their peers, because at a certain level, some of the executive leaders, it's such a competitive space that it's really difficult for executives to be transparent around the areas that they need improvement, because those things are used against them. So that's where coaches like myself become very valuable to leaders, because we are their support system. We're there to help them understand first the systems that they're operating in, and then elevating their awareness around, okay, so you have strengths in this area, but okay, you have strengths in areas where there are no needs. They don't need you to be strong in that area. So you have to constantly self assess, elevate your awareness so that your value proposition is what the org needs in that moment. Because it's a very what have you done for me lately situation in the world, period.
You bring up systems, and the systems of that is
Yes.
a thing a lot of people miss out on. They don't think about the system they're in. And even along the lines of not thinking about the system that they've created in themselves, going, well, once I get in here, I have to show that I am the best, I'm the right choice. I always find that sadly funny when people get in and just fire a couple people. It's like they just took them to the firing squad because they needed to do something. It's like, just time out. Hold up for a minute. Fucking ask questions.
Oh,
Go around and
absolutely.
talk to people. Spend the first few weeks just getting to know people. Understand what's going on. And I see that as a huge thing when leaders can actually say, well, I'm here. I know the things that I know, but I don't know anything else about you guys or what else you do here or how you do this. I like to think of myself when I go into stuff like that as the FNG, the fucking new guy. Fucking tell me things. Help
Oh,
me
yeah.
understand this instead of
Yeah.
being like, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's no need for that. And you're only going to fuck with the system that's in place already. But if people don't know that they're in a system, like we even like you talked about the schoolyard, school education system is a system. The family
Absolutely.
system is a system.
Yes.
All of these things are systems that then tie into how we act when we get into something to say, well, my ego tells me that I need to be a certain way, where it's like, you really don't. You're in. Don't be an asshole about it. Just go do things and figure out where you fit and how you can help and lead from there. I may be overstepping a boundary here, but I don't think so.
I think you like frame that up precisely. I have clients that are newly appointed into roles, or they within an organization that they currently work for, or they go into a new space. And what I encourage and coach to is to do a listening tour. Go in and find out what it is you can find out. And please don't start at the top. You need to go to the mail room. You need to go to
Mm-hmm.
the reception area. Though, listen, if you go into an organization and you go to the mail room and you go to the receptionist, you can find out everything about the company.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Now, listen, many of us, we've shifted the ways in which we work. There's a huge remote population. There's a huge work from home population. And then there's that hybrid model. But the takeaway here is that you need to get more information. And so I, use the header of awareness, but there's so many levels to awareness. Your self-awareness, acknowledging those things that you don't know, and then trying to identify if these are things that you don't know, create a list of the possible people who may know, because now your job is to connect with them and make sure that you can extract some of that valuable information so that all of your decisions can be more informed. Because when you come in, you don't know anything. And you bring your experiences with you, which is it's what got you there. But now it's the reset. Now you need to figure out, okay, where do we need to go?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty, I think, of the benefit to me of leaders getting a coach. And I don't think you need to be at any particular position in the organization to get a coach, because you need different things at different times. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're in little league, you needed a coach. But if you are going to go to like a D1 school, you have a coach. If you're going to the NFL, you have a coach.
Yeah.
Please don't let me try to fool anybody like I know anything about sports. But
Well, I had somebody on the podcast maybe a year ago who was like, Michael Jordan needed coaches. He needed multiple coaches. Are you better than Michael Jordan? I was like, what a solid point. Because
no,
even if you're not a sports
absolutely.
person, everybody knows MJ.
And you know what? I think there's something else that I like to do with my clients. If you work for an organization, if you're paying attention and if you're vested in the organization, you know the organization's values, you know the mission, you know the strategic initiatives, you know how they show up in the market, you know how much market cap they have, you know what their 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan is, depending on where you're situated in the org. You don't know that much about yourself. You don't even know your own value. You know the company's core values, but what are your core values?
Yeah.
Do you even know what a core value is? So what I like, what I encourage my clients to do, think about yourself as an organization. If you need to make a decision, who's on your board?
Hmm.
If you don't have a board, create a board.
Hmm.
Think of yourself as an organization. Think about how you want to show up in the world, because that's what businesses do. They think about, how do they want to show up in the market? Are they going to show up, in terms of price, quality, quantity?
Yeah, whatever.
That's what they need to identify. How do we show up in the market? You have to do the same thing for yourself. How do I want to show up?
Part of me is a little saddened by that. That makes total sense. But I'm also a little sad because it's part of the system where people get so deep in their career or the thing they're doing that we then have to say, all right, well, let's take that thing that you're really used to and let's actually go back to the basics and who you are.
Hmm.
And that's kind of sad, because most people don't know who they are. They're just kind of moving through life. And I get that there are people in the world that their purpose is to do whatever that small thing or whatever, and I don't mean to minimize it, but whatever
Yeah.
that thing is that they do. Other people, it's bigger things and there's more work to be done internally to do that stuff. But I it's sad to think that we have to then go, all right, well, let's put it in the construct of what you're used to. And
Hmm.
for people to go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I have my own board and I am an organization. But if we actually remove from that and go, well, why do you do the things that you do? What is the intention that's behind it? And really, what are the traumas or the situations that formed you when you were little to then be able to do these things? To think that when you get into an organization, you have to fire a few people or you have to do whatever you do, or even for the people that go, I know that I need to listen. Some people, it's an innate thing that they get that. Most people, that's a small percentage, I believe. And I don't know the exact numbers with that, but I'm sure you've had people where they're like, yeah, I get in and I just listen because that is who they are and that is their
Yes.
way of being. So, how do you help people to be able to step back, peel away from all of that, figure out who they are and what their way of being is, and then go back into the organization?
The thing about coaching is they have to want it. So there's that. That's, oversimplifying, but they have to want it. There have been times, in the coaching industry, and I'll tell you a little bit about, I'll back into this a little bit. The way I got introduced to coaching is, I mentioned that I started my career, um, early in my 20s. I worked, in the office of the president at what was then Ticketmaster, now Live Nation. And the office of the president was, made up of the president, the vice president, and the executive vice president. And I was executive assistant to the EVP. And so I got a front row seat to how business runs. And it sparked this desire in me to continue to understand how business runs. And more importantly, I had a front row seat to leadership and its impact on the broader organization. The other thing, which I think is interesting, and I didn't really think about it until I was thinking about, you and I having this conversation, is that there were three very different leaders, th- three totally different styles. Um, yeah, from really really good to tyrannical, but it was, that's what you get. So the term leadership is used so very wildly
Mm-hmm.
until nobody really knows what it is. And I even, in some research that I did, found a really interesting article where um, a source indicated that leadership is a system. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I've been looking. This leadership is a system. It actually is a system. So when you ask the question, how do you help a leader kind of determine what their needs are? They've got this, probably multi-billion-dollar assessment industry that helps you do that. But those assessments give you very high level ideals around how these people show up
Hmm.
in ordinary circumstances. But there's no such thing. There's no such thing as an ordinary circumstance. We are operating in very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments. And that was an acronym that, you will find in all of the leadership um, academic, you know, articles and such. And that was before COVID.
Mm.
Things have shifted even more. And so
Yeah.
the things that leaders need now are absolutely not what they needed before. They need agility and flexibility. They need to really ramp up their ability to connect with their people.
Hmm.
One of the things that flies in the face of that is that nobody wants to go back to the office. So it's there's this tension between what the needs are and what the status quo has been. And you know, I've just the other day I got on a call and the other person's camera wasn't on. And I got to tell you, that drives me insane. It drives me insane. And I don't understand why the leaders of these organizations will not share with their broader population that this is a camera culture. Like, if the camera's not on, it's a conference call. Like,
Hmm.
why have organizations invested in purchasing all these licenses for Zoom and nobody's cameras on? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But the cameras not being on isn't what doesn't make sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is that the leaders of the company have not shared the communication that this is what the expectation is.
I love the idea of leadership being a system. I think there's a lot that we can get in with that. But it also feels like because of COVID and because of the different situations that happened, where people need to be more people with people. You need to be
Oh,
more
I
empathetic.
love the way you said that. People need to people. The people need to people. Like,
Yeah.
what? Okay, so I'm working on a contract right now, and I go into a very large organization in the wealth management space. I'm there 2 days a week. The organization has a huge presence on this floor plate. They've got a couple of floors, and when you walk on the floor, there are people in the building, but it's quiet. And I sit and I watch people pass each other in the hallway, and they deliberately don't look at the other person. And I'm like, this is weird. I was in my car one day and I saw two guys walking, and I'm sitting at the light, and I said, I bet they're not even going to acknowledge each other. They walked right past each other, and they didn't even, they didn't do the little head nod. They did none of that. They acted like the other person wasn't there. And I'm like, this is weird.
It is weird, but it's also not weird. It's typical.
Yeah,
It's
it
normal.
is. It is
You know,
it
and there are
is.
some times like I know I do that at times. Like I'll be in the grocery store thinking about the shit that I need to get or what I'm gonna make or what I'm gonna do, and I just keep moving along, walk past people. But it's funny because even as you said it, I was just like the little nod, like even that, just an acknowledgement. There's another human around you.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I think, for leaders to be able to have someone that they can connect with to bounce these ideas off of, and ask those questions that are vulnerable, that they don't know the answers to. And more importantly, ask those questions that other people think they should know the answers to. Because that's scary to say, hey, I don't know how we do this. How should we be doing this? Because the first thing people think is, well, that's why they pay you the big bucks. And no, that's not why they pay you the big bucks. That's not why they pay you the big bucks. I've recently, and I think over time, bumped into what I like to call highly compensated incompetence. Because, when you do the kind of work that I've done and you have access to that information, and then you have an exchange with this person, you're
Yeah.
like, I did something wrong because
Yeah.
they're paying you what? Like,
How did you do this? How did you successfully get more money and you can't tie your shoes or
yes.
whatever it is? Um, you bring up a good point too. I think there are times I've been in organizations with people where the leaders will hire somebody because it was, let's take nepotism off the table, but there's some favoritism, some friend of a friend or whatever. And it's like they connect with the person, so they think they're going to be a good fit. Then they bring people in. There was an organization I worked with a number of years ago that we were cruising along. I was leading the division. They brought somebody in who was nowhere close to what we were doing and then put them over top of me. I remember talking to the CEO of the company. I was like, I don't know what your leaders are thinking here. This doesn't make any sense. And we are literally oil and water. And within a few months, it was like, all right, well, I've got to tap out because this person is not going anywhere and it's only making it worse. And that was one of the things, like, it hit me, but I have seen it in so many different ways. And I know that I had been that leader in different times of like, well, I need to come in and make these changes and do these things. And thankfully, I've had other leaders go, calm down, sit the
Yeah.
fuck down.
Yes.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about this.
Relax yourself.
Yeah. Calm down. You're good. And being able to actually get in and do the things that we feel we can do from a clean space. There's a lot of uncleanliness just going on of just, well, I think I need to do this or I need to do that. And we're just kind of making shit up. And really, if you need to get in and make some dramatic change, it's probably not the right organization. And the leaders at the top probably have no fucking idea what's going on. If they're like, we need you to come in and blow everything up. Maybe there's a little bit of caveat to that. Maybe there are certain organizations where
Yeah.
they're like, we need to blow everything up. And I recently had somebody on who's built a few billion-dollar companies. And he's like, there are levels where you just have to change people out.
Mhm.
I have an organization I'm working with now, talking directly with their owner. And I'm like, you're in a regime change. Be excited about this. Like, it sucks your buddy's gone or whatever, but like, you're in a regime change. What a good thing. And those people might get you to this point. And then
Yes.
great, you'll have to get them to go find excellence somewhere else or whatever it looks like. But being able to understand, like, there are roles and pieces to be able to be played, but those leaders that you work with, how do you help them work through that on their own? And the question I'm really asking here is for the people that are going through this right now, that are leaders that are listening to this episode, who may not be ready to hire a coach or even reach out with questions or whatever. What's that advice you'd give them as they're kind of working through these sort of situations to be able to help them? That's like, friendly advice you'd give somebody. You're sitting at a bar and shooting the shit with them, like, hey, next time, try this.
You know what I tell somebody? I would say, listen, this is what I need you to do. I need you to shift your focus and figure out your value proposition. Think about what value you bring, what value you, how does the room change when you enter the room?
Hmm. That's a question.
And then if there's like dead silence in your mind when you think about how does the value change when I walk in the room, now you know what your marching orders are. Try to figure out if you are okay walking into a room and not having any presence, not having any power, and not having any impact. And listen, sometimes your silence can be powerful, and your presence, the fact that you are actually there and present in the room, that you are actually on the call with your camera on. These are valuable ads that in this M&A environment that we work in, this we I remember you didn't there wasn't this accounting exercise where you bought all these companies and then you decided, okay, now we have to make sure that we realize X number of dollars. And so the first response is to sort of take a look at the head count and see how you can you know synergize the company, which is that happens all the time now. It's normal now, no matter what industry you work in. It's how can we make more bricks with less straw? Like
Yeah.
how do we do this? How do we get more market share with with fewer with reduced human capital, right? So then you think about what does that do to you're the human capital.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is shift the focus and make sure that you're valuable. Because if you shift the focus and you make sure that you are valuable, when there's a notification that there's a new wave of a new wave of layoffs coming, you don't know if you're going to get caught in it or not. You really don't. Are these decisions thoughtful? Most of the time they are. I'm associated with organizations that, yes, it's not arbitrary. There are strategies that are being executed from the senior leaders, but it still doesn't give you any comfort to know whether or not you'll be part of that.
Yeah.
So the only comfort that I see for that is be confident in the value that you add, because the skills that you acquire, they belong to you.
Yeah. Good point.
They belong to you. No, they belong to you. And so what a lot of the data suggests now is because there's been so much volatility and there's the need to identify top tier talent. What can you do to make sure that you are top tier talent?
Mm.
So that's what I would tell someone. Like if you're and be really honest with yourself. If you're in an organization and you know that is just not where you need to be,
What a beautiful thing.
it's a gift.
Yeah. Be
Because
aware of it.
now you know, okay, listen, I'm at this company and I don't really like this place. Or what happens often is you get exactly what you described. You get a new leader. It happened to me once. I got a new leader and I said to myself, yeah, I'm not working for this person.
Yeah.
It's not,
Time is ticking at that point.
I'm like, it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And the reason I was able to confidently make that decision is because I knew my value. I'm like, yeah, I'm not, I don't want to be associated with an organization or working in a company or even having a client that, I think it goes both ways. Like I won't coach just anybody.
Sure. Yeah. And that makes total sense to be able to qualify those things, but it starts with us. It starts with us being able to qualify that.
Mhm, mhm.
I really love that answer. To couple that along with what advice would you give to somebody that's on their path towards self mastery for themselves to then be able to be that better leader, and not only just in the office or from their home office, but with themselves and with the people around them?
I mean, we've said it a lot, but I think the awareness piece and spending time, anything that you mastery takes time.
Hmm.
It takes repetition, it takes time, it takes attention, and it takes focus. You mentioned Michael Jordan. We could think about Kobe Bryant. We could think about Venus and Serena. We could think about any athlete. I mean, it's always a good analogy when you talk about coaching. But the amount of time that they focus to show themselves improved. Now, the flip side of that is when you focus on something, the truth is you neglect a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So you have to decide how important is this thing that you want to focus on, because you will neglect other things.
Hmm.
And
That's powerful.
I many years ago, the nerd, I'm always looking for a book, but many years ago, I was taking an English class, and there's this big popular Bartlett's Book of Quotes, right? Everybody uses that, or they used to use it. And I was like, well, I need another book of quotes. So I found this book, and it was My Soul Looks Back Lest I Forget, a collection of quotes from people of color. And I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
So it's a nice coffee table book. And I had it on my coffee table. And one day I'm walking through the house, and, the music is playing, and something told me to pick the book up, and I opened it up and randomly read one of the quotes. And it was a quote from Maya Angelou. And it said, ask for what you want and be prepared to pay for what you get. And it sat me down. I sat on the sofa, and I was like, that's deep. Because I was at a moment in my life where I had recently asked for something that I wanted, and I had no idea how much I had to pay for it. And I was like, I wish I had read this about 2 years ago, because I'm still paying for this. And so when you think about ask for what you want and be prepared to pay for what you get, if you want to master something, it's going to cost you something. Mediocrity don't cost that much. Mastery is mastery. That's a luxury item.
Yeah.
So I think when you think about mastering things, you've got to know that it's a cost to it.
Yeah. And much deeper than you might want to just bite off from the onset. But getting through it, going through it, it can change us in so many beautiful ways if we allow ourselves to actually work through that. And I appreciate that you brought that up and you tied that together so nicely. It's been a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure there are different things we could have gone much deeper into, but I think we got into a lot of great stuff today. Before I let you go, where can people find you and where can they connect with you?
So I can be located via my website at www.branchandassociates.com. I'm also present on LinkedIn, and this has been amazing. I've loved the time that we've shared talking about leadership and playgrounds, and because really the corporation is a microcosm of that little playground that we used to be on. Because all the things that went on the playground, those are the things that go on in the organizations, large and small, that we're all a part of or aspire to be a part of.
Great point with that. What a cool thing that, even as kids and as adults, there's still stuff that we can tie back to, but us being able to peel ourselves out of it, work within ourselves to be able to be better within the organization, better within ourselves, and feel more aligned with everything. What a really awesome thing. Joy, I appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.